In this lecture, we are going to explore one of the most powerful features of the browser. Believe it or not, the browser performs a special conversion on our document. It's converting our HTML document from text to a tree of objects. Sounds confusing? Let's dig deeper into the mechanics of this feature. In this example, I have a basic HTML document, nothing we haven't seen before. The browser will scan through your document's HTML to understand its structure. It'll produce a tree of objects. The relationship of our tags has been mapped into a tree diagram. Each element will become available as an object. These objects contain dozens of properties and methods for interacting with the element. We can change an element's content, styles, or attributes. To take it a step further, we can insert or remove elements from the document. Essentially, we can bring life to the document through JavaScript. This feature is called the Document Object Model. Let's explore our options for grabbing elements from the document. For starters, let's try grabbing the entire document. Open the main.js file in your editor. Inside this file, let's clear the contents to start fresh. Next, let's log an object called document. The document object is defined by the browser. It's an object that represents the entire HTML document. Through this object, we can interact with the various elements, attributes, and content of the document. In the browser, refresh the page. Afterward, open the console of the developer tools. The entire document has been logged. We can look closely at the object to view the HTML document. As you can see, JavaScript captured every element in our document. We can hover our mouse over the elements to highlight them on the page. For example, if I hover my mouse over the h1 tag, a blue box is layered on top of the element. Selecting the entire document is great, but you may want to select specific elements. For demonstration purposes, let's try selecting the h1 tag. Inside our script, create a variable called h1. Its value will be a function called document.querySelector. The querySelector function is a special function for selecting an element within the document. It has one argument, which is a valid CSS selector for the element. You heard that right. JavaScript uses CSS selectors for grabbing elements. In our case, we're trying to grab the h1 tag. Therefore, we can pass in the name of the tag. Next, let's log the h1 variable. In our browser, we can refresh the page to view the results. In the console, the h1 tag has been logged. Perfect. With a single function, we're able to select any element. The querySelector function allows us to grab elements by their class, ID, or any other attribute. For example, if we had a class called example, we can select the element with .example. If the element had an ID called example, the dot can be replaced with a hash. We're not restricted to using a single selector. We can use nested selectors. As an example, let's update our document by adding an unordered list element. Inside this element, add 3 list item elements with random text. Switch back to the script. We're going to define a variable called li with a value of the document.querySelector function. The query for the list item element will be the following: ul_li. Technically, we could grab a list item by using li. However, for demonstration purposes, let's stick to this query. After creating the variable, let's log it into the console. Next, refresh the page. As you can see, the list item element has been selected. However, there's one problem. Oftentimes, you may want to select multiple elements. The query selector function will select the first item it finds. If other elements match the query, they'll be ignored. In our script, we can select multiple elements by changing the function from query selector to query selector all. If we refresh the page again, things will be different. The console will log an array of elements selected by our query. Perfect! We've got two methods on our belt for selecting elements. There are other functions available for selecting elements. They're the getElementById, getElementsByTagName, and getElementsByClassName functions. As their name suggests, they allow us to grab elements by IDs, tag names, or classes. In my opinion, I prefer to stick to the query selector function. It's easier to remember a single function. However, you're more than welcome to explore these options. At the end of the day, they'll return an elements object. Through this object, we can interact with the various properties of the element. Let's look at an example. Above the console statement for the list item element, let's change the following property: listitem1.style.color. Keep in mind, we're selecting multiple list item elements that are stored in an array. Before manipulating a specific object, we must grab it from the array. Objects for elements will have a property called style. The style property is an object of styles applied to an element. We have the option of reading or writing to this object. In this example, we are going to change the color to red. After applying this change, we should see the text for the second list item element change to red. Refresh the page. Voila! We've successfully changed the color. There's so much more we can do with the document object model. We can add events, change the contents of a tag, or remove elements. Overall, browsers provide a robust API for interacting with the document. In the resource section of this lecture, I provide a link to a reference page for the DOM. This page will provide an overview of all the properties and methods available from the DOM API. I encourage you to check it out and play around with what you find. For now, let's continue our discussion of JavaScript in the next lecture.